All right, we have lesson 1.3. How do laws become laws? It's a very good question. They actually don't even start as laws and royal assent. What's that going to be all about? Stick around and let's learn something. So, how do laws actually become laws? This is, like I said, this is lesson 1.3. We are still in chapter 1, all about Canada's federal political system of government. How do laws become laws? That's what we're going to be dealing with today. Bills and laws. A proposed law is known as a bill. And any member of the House of Commons or Senate can propose a law, but typically this is done by a member of the cabinet, so the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Remember, the cabinet, the Prime Minister, this is our executive branch of government. So typically they are the ones that will introduce these bills. A government bill, this is what it's called when the party in power introduces that bill. And this is typically what all bills are going to be called. However, that being said, you can have something called a private member's bill. And this is anybody in the House of Commons, whether this person belongs to the party that is in power or one of the opposition parties. Anybody can introduce a bill to Parliament, and the parliamentarians will take a look at it and vote on it. I've got an image here, a picture. This is the basic way of how a bill becomes a law. So we're going to start at the start. We've got the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's cabinet. They come up with a bill, which gets presented to a committee, which goes into the House of Commons for a vote, which goes then into the Senate for a vote, which goes to the Governor General, and then it becomes a law. It's not that easy, though. I wish it was. Trust me, you wish it were too, because we don't know how long this lesson is going to be. So you probably wish this is going to be all there is to a bill becoming a law. A bill goes through 5 stages in the House of Commons, then an additional 5 stages in the Senate. Once it has passed the House of Commons and the Senate, the bill now is given royal assent and it becomes a law. The graphic that I have here, the image I have here, is a little bit more detailed for each of these stages. Now, I know you're thinking, Mr. Philipplik, you can't count. There's only 5 stages, but this picture has more than 5. Let me tell you what I mean by the 5 stages. The first stage is called the first reading. This is where the bill is considered read for the first time and printed. Then goes to the second reading. We've got the members debating on this bill's principle. Then it goes to the committee stage. That's the third stage. And it's studied there in more detail, where it goes to a report stage where people and members, that is, can make amendments. Then it goes to the third reading where it is debated and voted on, passes, goes to the Senate to do the exact same thing again, and then it is given royal assent. Those are the main stages of the bill. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here in the lawmaking steps because I did rush through this graphic, but I want to show you the notes that kind of go along with this. The lawmaking steps, okay? Like I mentioned, there are those 5 stages. So our first reading is stage 1. So a bill is presented. It's described, it's printed, and it's distributed to the House of Commons and its members, where they go back to their office, they go and they do their homework, they do their reading, they highlight, they underline, they scribble things out, they cross things out, they circle, they ask questions in the margins. They are studying this bill. There is no debate, there is no vote that happens at this time. Okay, they're just looking at the printed notes of the bill. It then goes to a second reading where this now gets debated and voted on the idea of the bill. Okay, it's policy. Is this bill actually good policy? Does the bill serve the interests of Canadians? Is this something we should actually be taking a look at? If so, it heads over to the third stage. This is the committee stage, where the detailed study of the bill happens. On the committee, you could have MPs, you could have senators. They take a look at the bill and they ask for witnesses, they ask for experts, they ask for citizens, they ask for people who this bill might affect, and they want to hear from these people, from this proposed bill that takes place. They create a report, they have some recommendations, they write it down, and then they go into the report stage where additional debate and a vote takes place on those changes that were presented to the bill in the committee stage. Everybody takes a look at this. We take a look at the recommendations. It then goes for stage number 5, the third reading. This is where the final vote, the final debate takes place, and the bill either gets rejected. If it gets rejected, it finds its way into the shredders and it's never to be seen again temporarily. It might come back. Or it passes the third reading, the 5th stage, and then it goes to the Senate. Once it's in the Senate, the exact same thing happens again. We have a first reading, a second reading, a committee stage, a report stage, a third reading. If it passes the Senate and those 5 steps again, it goes to the Governor General, and the Governor General stamps it, makes it official by putting the Governor General's signature on there, and now this bill becomes a law. The government then decides, when is this bill going to actually be put into motion, into proclamation, but that is the process of a bill becoming a law. So let's take a look at an example here. The Federal Accountability Act is what we are going to be taking a look. The Federal Accountability Act was introduced in April of 2006. Its goal was to protect whistleblowers, protect individuals who have information, to protect them if they choose to come forward with this information. The Federal Accountability Act also required members of Parliament to keep a more detailed log of who they were meeting with and why they were meeting with certain individuals. All of this was to create transparency in the House of Commons, as well as to protect, like I said, those whistleblowers who had information about abuse or neglect or anything along those lines, to protect these people when they came forward. So like I mentioned, the Federal Accountability Act, the FFA, was introduced on April 11th of 2006 with its first reading. Again, if you remember the first reading, all of the members of Parliament, they get their package and they read through it. They do make their notes, they underline, they do whatever it is that they have to do to understand what this bill is actually about. It goes into the second reading, and from here we have that vote that kind of takes place. Is this bill a good policy? If it's not a good policy, the bill right now gets rejected. If it is a good policy, the bill is studied and it goes into the committee stage. Now, in this example, the Federal Accountability Act, the members of Parliament at the House of Commons held 28 meetings. They met 28 times to discuss this bill at the committee stage. They heard from 129 witnesses, and this included like First Nations, labor unions, other political parties. They heard from experts here. In that committee stage, they made 116 changes. So that's a lot of changes for a bill. Then it went to the report stage. At the report stage, this is stage number 4 in our bill to law process. The MPs voted a further 22 amendments into the Federal Accountability Act. So they put more into this bill. It then went to a third reading, and this is your 5th area, your 5th spot, your 5th stage in how a bill becomes a law, and it got voted on. And this particular bill, the Federal Accountability Act, passed the House of Commons, and it went to the Senate. And the same 5 stages took place again in the Senate. We had the first reading, where the senators got this new bill presented to them. They went back and they did their homework. Then they had the second reading. Is this a law that should be looked at? Should this bill be looked at for the sake of Canadians? Then it went into the committee stage. At the committee stage, the senators had 21 meetings about this bill and listened to 237 witnesses from all different walks of life. The Senate recommended 156 changes. That's a lot of changes. It then went to the report stage, and then it went to the third reading. Now, it passed the third reading. That means it can now go to the Governor General. But because they made and recommended some amendments, it then had to go back to the House of Commons. It had to go back to the House of Commons because this is now essentially, it's almost like a new bill because the Senate made some changes, right? They made 156 recommendations. So it went to the House of Commons, and the House of Commons, at first, they accepted 20 of the Senate's amendments. So then it went through all the steps, got to the Senate, but then the Senate rejected it and went back to the House of Commons. And eventually, the House of Commons accepted 2 more Senate amendments. So not the 156 original amendments. It got changed, as you can see here in this graphic. After all of that, and after all the stages, it then went to the Governor General. So it passed both houses at the very end. It passed both houses, the House of Commons, the upper house, which is the Senate. And then it went to the Governor General, who gave it a royal assent, who made the bill a law. And this happened December of 2006. Introduced in April. Then it spent May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and it already made it, it went all the way to December before it became a law. So that's a really long process. And it's typical. You're not going to have a bill turning into a law in 5 days, right? It's going to take some time. 5 weeks, maybe. 5 months, yeah, that's highly possible. 8 months, yeah. It depends on the bill, and it depends on how intricate this bill is going to be. Is it going to use a lot of tax dollars? Is it going to create new taxes? All of that needs to be looked at for it to become a law finally. Now, I'm going to argue that there's some pre-stages to a bill before it even becomes a bill, actually. And these are the pre-bill stages. So I'm going to argue that there's 3 additional stages before this idea even enters into the House of Commons. Well, the first pre-stage, well, we need to identify a problem or an issue. What's the problem? What's the issue that we need to solve? Well, we're going to come up with a solution. So a cabinet minister, or maybe the minister's department, they need to come up with a solution to whatever the problem or issue that is being presented. Then, not only that, we also have to have a cabinet meeting. We have to present this idea to the cabinet. Like, is this even a good idea? Or am I like way off base here? So I'm going to throw it out to the cabinet, and I'm going to see what the cabinet decides. So if then it is approved, then the minister is going to draft a bill which will then be presented to the House of Commons. Now, if you remember, this, I'm talking about the cabinet here, this is a government bill. The cabinet is part of the party in power. The same thing would happen in a private member's bill. A private member, so a member that is not one that is in the cabinet or even of the party in power, they will identify a problem or an issue. They will go to their party or even their constituents to find a solution, and then they will draft up this bill to present to the House of Commons. So even though we teach you that there are 5 main steps to a bill becoming a law, there's also steps that need to happen before a bill is even a bill. And that's where we have to identify our problems or issues and come up with some solutions. All right. I want you to head over to your notebooks and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.